Welcome to Parallel and Perpendicular Lines Recap. In this video, we're going to talk about how to come up with an equation of a line given 2 points, and also how to come up with an equation of a line passing through a point that is parallel or perpendicular to another line. So let's start off with how to come up with an equation of a line through 2 points. What you're going to want to do first is find the slope. So we know that in order to find the slope, you have to do the change in y over the change in x. Now it doesn't matter which group is your 1 and which group is your 2. As long as you match it, the x and y's up properly. So I have negative 2 minus 2 over 4 minus negative 1. Please be careful about the double negative. You're going to end up with negative 4 over positive 5 because 4 minus negative 1 is a positive 5. Now that you have the slope, you're going to want to write the equation. And the equation is going to come from the point-slope formula. So now I have my point-slope formula, and you might notice that this is exactly like, or not exactly, close to y equals mx plus b. The only difference is that you have, well, you don't have the b, but you also have the minus y1 and minus x1. Now the y1 and x1 are going to be from your coordinates. You can choose either one you like, so really you can have two answers. And also you're going to use the slope that you just came up with before. That is your m value. So now I have y minus something is equal to my slope times x minus something. And we know the slope is negative 4/5. So all you have to do is insert the coordinate. Now you have two coordinates, which is why I was saying you could have two different answers. Your first answer with the first coordinate would be y minus negative 1. Oops, sorry, that is your x value. I want my y value. There we go, y minus 2, and you don't need the parentheses technically. You wouldn't be wrong to leave them though, is equal to negative 4/5 times x minus negative 1. There you go, that is one answer. Or you can use the other one, which would be y minus negative 2 equals negative 4/5 x minus 4. And there you go. Now, these solutions are correct if they ask you for an equation. They are not correct if they specifically ask you for an equation in slope-intercept form. So when they're saying slope-intercept form, they want the format of y equals mx plus b. So you have to be careful of what the question is asking you. So just a quick note on the difference between the point slope and the slope intercept formulas is that the point slope formula in the blue up here uses the slope and a coordinate, a point, whereas the slope intercept formula uses the slope and b is the y-intercept. So, I mean, the names are pretty self-explanatory. In order to get it into slope intercept form, let's use the first one. You're going to have y minus 2 equals negative 4/5 times x, and minus negative 1 could be plus 1. From there, you're going to work on getting the negative 4/5 distributed. So you have y minus 2 is equal to negative 4/5 x minus 4/5. And then you're going to add 2 to both sides. If you're having trouble doing this and you want to try doing it without a calculator, which you definitely should, if you have 2 minus 4/5, which is the same as negative 4/5 plus 2, you're going to want to change the 2. Right now it's really a 2 over 1. You're going to want to change it so that it has the same denominator of 5. So you're going to multiply it by 5 over 5 to get the same denominator. That's going to become 10 over 5, which is 2 if you reduce it. And this is going to simplify to, that's a 10. This is a 5, very sloppy 5. So 10 minus 4 is 6 over 5. So I'm going to put plus 6 over 5. And now this is in slope-intercept form. So if you did it with the other equation instead, you'll see that no matter what, even though your point slope formulas were different, when you converted it to the slope-intercept form, you got the same exact answer. Now let's try working on writing an equation of a line passing through the point 1 comma -2, and I wrote parallel / perpendicular to the equation because we're going to find it. I really combined two problems in one. We're going to find the equation of a line that's parallel, and then we're going to find the equation of a line that is perpendicular. Now in this case, they didn't give us 2 points, so they gave us a point and an equation, which makes things a little bit different, but mostly the same. So for the first one, you're still going to want to find the slope, but the difference is that you don't have 2 points to find the slope, you have an equation. So you want to take this equation and put it in slope-intercept form to figure out what the slope is. In other words, rewrite it as y equals. So I have 3x minus 2y equals 1. And when you find the equation of the slope, you have negative 2y equals negative 3x plus 1. I keep my x first because you know y equals mx plus b, the term with the x comes first. Divide everything by a negative 2. Now, you could have solved for this by adding the 2 y's to both sides. It doesn't matter. You should be getting the same answer as me in the end. So we should be seeing that the slope is going to be 3/2. Now I'm actually going to write that as the original slope, just to keep my notes more in order. So this is step 1. Now, if you have a line that is parallel, parallel lines, right, are two lines that never intersect. And the reason why they don't intersect is because parallel lines have the same slope. And that is terrible handwriting, but you get the idea, hopefully. Parallel lines have same slope. So if you're doing this equation for the parallel lines, your original slope is going to be the same slope as your equation for the parallel line. Now, perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Perpendicular lines intersect at a 90-degree angle. So if one slope was, let's say this one's going upwards, so this is positive 4/5, then you have to flip it, take the reciprocal, but you have to notice that this line is going downwards, so you also have to negate it. So you want to negate and flip. Please be careful when you're doing this. A common mistake is that, you know, everyone's good with 1/3. The negative reciprocal would be -3/1, but or just -3. That's fine. A lot of people tend to get tripped up where if your original slope was -2, then the negative reciprocal of that would be +1/2. So, right, because it's really -2/1. So if you ever have an integer, just put a 1 in the denominator, make it a fraction, and that might help you find the negative reciprocal of it. So if our original slope was 3/2, that means our parallel slope would stay the same as 3/2. If our original slope was 3/2, then your new perpendicular slope would be the negative reciprocal of -2/3. From there, you're going to use the point slope formula to come up with an equation. So let's work with the parallel line first. We have y minus something is equal to our slope times x minus something. Now that coordinate, the something, is going to come from up here with your x1 and y1. So I'm going to go back and input my values. So I have -2 and I have 1. And you're done. That's your answer. You do not have to simplify it because this only asks for an equation. It didn't specifically say put it in slope-intercept form. For the next one, we have the same thing. We have y minus something is equal to our perpendicular slope of -2/3, x minus something. And when you insert your coordinates, you have y minus -2 and x minus 1. So that is the way to write an equation of a line that is parallel or perpendicular. Please be careful of which one you're actually doing. I know that a common way that they try to trip you up with perpendicular lines is that they'll give you an option of an answer with a slope of 2/3 because they'll take the reciprocal, but they're going to hope that you forgot to negate the slope as well. So your first step to these problems are going to be to find the slope, unless you're actually given it, which would be very nice. But you're going to find the slope by either doing the change in y over the change in x if given 2 points, or if you're given an equation, solve the equation for y equals, and then whatever comes before the x is your slope. You need to remember that parallel lines have the same slopes, whereas perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Emphasis on the negative part of it. Make sure that the two slopes, one is positive and one is negative. The point slope formula is really helpful to come up with an equation when you have a point and a slope. Keep in mind that m is the slope and x1 and y1 is a point on the line. In this equation, you should never be touching the y and the x. Those are going to stay your main variables for the equation. And finally, the slope-intercept formula we all know as y equals mx plus b. That one, you don't really have to put it into slope-intercept formula unless the question is specifically asking for it, or if the multiple choice answer choices are in slope-intercept form. I highly recommend, if the question just says find the equation of a line, leave it in the point slope formula. Why make more work for yourself? And if you try to convert it to the slope-intercept formula when you don't have to, and if you make a mistake, you're going to lose points where you really didn't have to do that in the first place and you would have kept your points. So please read carefully with what they want, and remember, you don't get any of this information on a reference sheet. You have to remember all of this. And that's all for this video.